After a week of betrayal, high drama and emotion, Norwich City delivered a clear message at Ewood Park. United we stand. Led by their Sargent and protected by a rather big Serb, the yellow and green troops dug deep to win back-to-back away championship matches for the first time since January 2023 and the start of David Wagner's era. Welcome back to the latest edition of the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, basking in the glory of more away day delight at Blackburn Rovers. I'm your host, Connor Southwell, and I'm joined by a man who can be frequently seen tapping the badge in Paddy, Davitt. And Pad, it's been a week of drama, emotion, theatre, all of those various aspects. That was probably just what the doctor ordered for the Canaries at Ewood Park.
That was a very good intro from you, Connor. I like the word betrayal. I thought I must have walked into some period drama here, some 18th century, I don't know, dangerous liaisons type. That's going to mean nothing to anybody who has no recollection of that. But a very good film from yesteryear. But well, it had all those elements over the last few days. It was definitely the reaction showed it was almost transcended football. It was almost a Norfolk-Suffolk pride, as you say, badge being the operative word, given the Nunez unveil optics. But then, thankfully, it meant a different thing at about 4:45 on Saturday when a certain, as you say, Sergeant at Arms reminded everybody that the real star is still very firmly in the building for Norwich. And it would seem, where are we now? We're probably about 30 odd hours away as we sit here recording from the deadline closing, certainly in the UK. And that wasn't the act of both in terms of his performance, but also the way he celebrated that goal, second goal, a match-sealing goal in front of the away end at Ewood Park, and then the celebrations after the game, all very pointed, all very much, for me, a player who absolutely loves his role in this refit, this refresh under Liam Manning, and is enjoying, not only his status within the dressing room, but within the club now, because he is the talisman. Make no mistake, he is the glue. He is their star player. Liam Manning again reaffirmed he's the best number 9 in the division. I think you'd get a debate going now. Kenny McLean added to it recently, didn't he? Is he the best player in the championship? It's all very subjective, but certainly for anybody with green and yellow persuasion, he is the real deal. And I've seen post final whistle yesterday, just on social media, lots of people now putting him forward as their best ever / favourite ever Norwich player for not only what he does on the pitch and what he delivers on the pitch, but how he carries himself and the professionalism that he shows, given he has had to deal with a lot of noise around him and where he could end up this summer. And we know how close he can maybe on the Wolfsburg front. But he's here. He's very much committed. He's very much part of it. And he's an absolutely integral element if Norwich are going to push on from what now feels 6 points from 12, 2 wins from 4. Feels a good, solid start. And as we said, on that Instagram live yesterday morning from our northwest base in Lancashire ahead of heading on to Ewood Park, the restorative powers of a positive result off the back of 2 or 3 days of probably feeling like they'd lost the PR discourse with their Suffolk brethren. And boy, was that a restorative feeling, because at the final whistle, inside the stadium, further afield, obviously, however you consume that result from a Norwich perspective, the world was a better place if you have anything to do with Norwich, if Norwich is your club. And that is credit to Liam Manning and those players who did, as Liam Manning, and we'll get into it, I know, in due course, sort of unpicked where he was coming out, where the club were coming out in terms of that Nunez decision. The line about, well, I want players who are all in. I've just left the dressing room to come and do his media, where players can sit to the guy to their left or to their right and know I can trust them when the going gets tough. They're going to step up. They're going to dig me out of a hole if I need that. We only want players who are all in and who are going to show those attributes. The inference clearly evident that Marcelino Nunez was not of that mind. So he's gone. He's the past. Josh Sargent, we hope, is the present, and in the intervening period, at least until maybe January's window swings into view, the future. And alongside him, lots of other positive elements in an all-round, not perfect by any means, because it got a little bit uncomfortable in that second half. But certainly off the back of the week that has been 2 home defeats, a transfer that will reverberate in these parts for the ages, a real positive, uplifting performance result feel now around the club going into, sadly now, 2 weeks to sit and stew before they resume action, because I'm sure now, if you're anything to do with Norwich, you'd love to have a game this coming week just to roll it on again. But let's not be too greedy. Let's just remember where we were maybe on Wednesday evening when the first news about Nunez broke, where we were certainly on Friday morning, wasn't it, when you see him in blue and tapping badges, to where we are now post Blackburn. It's a far better headspace if you're anything to do with Norwich.
It is indeed. And look, what we're not going to do over the next hour or so is we're not going to pour over every detail of what has unfolded this week. We've, if you haven't listened to it or you haven't watched it, we've got a whole another podcast on our immediate reaction to that Marcelino Nunez news. I think we're going to try and move it on a little bit based on, I think, what it created yesterday, Paddy, because we kind of spoke about this again yesterday morning about how sometimes an event like that, a major event, with all of the noise, all of the drama, all of the theatre, all of the emotion that comes with it, actually it can be a real binding agent for a group of players compared to maybe putting everything into disarray. And it certainly looked like that yesterday. And of course, it was those scenes at the end that kind of graphically illustrated that. Josh Sargent being pushed to the front to lead the celebrations, the players smiling, Vladan Kovacevic joining in with chants from the stands. All of that stuff is key. But actually, it's the elements on the pitch that we saw, the willingness to run, the willingness to block, the willingness to fight, as you say, to look to your left and to your right and look for teammates who are committed. And that's what it felt like over the piece. As you say, it was nowhere near perfect, especially in that second half, but it was definitely committed.
But in the context of this week we've just had, it's that second half. It's you go in at half time, you're a goal up, you're a player up. You may feel it's really for Norwich to go on, put the foot down, metaphorically, and see that game off. That didn't happen. Blackburn, credit to them, with the numerical disadvantage, really had a go there. Rather sparse home crowd. Nevertheless, they made a lot of noise. They got behind the effort they could see on the pitch, and it wasn't comfortable. Crystallising in that still now when you see it back, that unbelievable double reaction stop from Vlad, the Impaler, because at that point, can you imagine if it goes 1-1 and then Norwich, heaven forbid, either draw that game or go on and lose that game, off the back of these last few days, off the back of hitherto a rather patchy, unconvincing, bitty, disjointed early days under Liam Manning, that would have fed into a completely different narrative and a completely different feel. So for me, it is that spell. You wouldn't want to have to go through it, much like you wouldn't want to have to go through the Portsmouth backs against the wall effort that produced that previous away win. But the fact that they could go through that speaks volumes for that sense of togetherness, that sense of a band of brothers, whatever the outside external noise has been, whatever the focus, whatever the harsh light maybe that's been reflected on their club. Because we know that in the immediate aftermath, there was a lot of focus on why have Norwich made that decision, why have they countenanced that, and a lot of flack, let's be honest, social media generated, but nevertheless directed firmly at the Ben Nappers and anybody who was connected with that decision, that business decision. So you're dealing with that, and it would have been very easy maybe to, as a group of players, to when the going got tough in that second half at Ewood Park, maybe to, even on a subconscious level, just slightly dip, slightly feel the world's against them. And no, they weathered that. They came through it. Weathered being the operative word, because as you know, Connor, having not brought your coat, it was a rather cold, wet, bleak, late summer, dare I say, early autumnal feeling to the weather around Ewood Park. But that all added to the sense of drama, and to now emerge through that, as they did at Portsmouth, with that result, that could do so much for the belief, really, the belief systems, the gelling of, you talk about Kovacevic and Medic, Topic, Maatsen watched from a slightly detached view on the bench, having joined in the last few days. Those new players, Kvistgaarden, first start in the league again alongside Sargent, Kenny McLean coming back in, Ben Kraseni looking like he could be an option on that left-hand side of the defence. Real positives there, underpinned by the character that they showed, the resolve, the willingness to, no, we're in front here. It's tough yards, but we're going to come through that. We're going to come out the other side with this result. And we're going to prove to anybody who has questioned that, is there, maybe encapsulated by Nunez's unwillingness to be part of a Norwich City Championship promotion attempt. That isn't an accusation you would level at any of those players who were on duty for Norwich City yesterday at Ewood Park, because to a player, they really dug in. And I'd imagine, while Liam Manning would be the first to admit elements of that performance again underline visibly that there's work to be done in terms of the control, in terms of not having to go to the well quite to that extent at 1-0 in the second half. But it's a lot easier to build in those elements and work on those elements now moving forward when you've got the base in place, which, as Liam has often now spoken since he came in the building, it's behaviours, it's culture, it's that foundation that even on a bad day or even in a bad phase of a game when you're playing reasonably well, as they did in the first half, you can rely on the cultures, the behaviours, the willingness to resist, the willingness to weather those metaphorical and literal storms and come out the other side. And that's a great foundation, really, because as we know, the Championship on any given day is going to present that type of challenge. And it's really probably an accusation that could have been levelled at Johannes's group last season, when too often they were faced with that adversity. They wilted, they went under, they were too easy in the end to get results against and to overcome. I don't think that's an accusation you will level at Liam Manning and this group of players.
Yeah, completely. And it felt to me, and I said this in my verdict a little bit yesterday, it feels very early and it's a big call to make, and obviously it's more graphic after victories, but it does feel like there's a sense of connection forming between particularly the fans on the road who have obviously had the stuff to shout about this season and those players. But actually you saw it at the end, you saw it at Watford, you saw it at Portsmouth as well. I think all three away ends have been excellent, and those moments of celebration have been great. Of course, now the challenge is, can they put a run of results together? Can they do it at Carrow Road? And that is probably the next that's the next learning point for this group. And of course, we will come on to that later. As I say, I don't want to pour over all of the details of the Marcelino Nunez saga, because we've done it now in so much detail and depth, and I think there's pretty much every single angle covered. But what I did want to touch upon was clearly the words of Liam Manning yesterday. It was the first time publicly that we've heard from him on that sale, and it's interesting. He's a head coach who picks his words carefully. I don't think he sensationalizes stuff, and he can be quite to the point at times around certain aspects, and he's just very careful about what he says, messages he delivers, the way he delivers them. It felt yesterday when you asked him about Marcelino Nunez, it was probably as raw and honest and candid as maybe he's been about anything, and that was probably necessary. But like you say, in many ways, all of his answer felt like a damning indictment to the conduct, I guess, and commitment probably of that player.
Yeah, I mean, from what you and Sam were saying, it was very similar to the messaging he gave at that trust event that you hosted on I'm going to say Thursday, which obviously at that point the news had broken the night before, but hadn't officially gone through. But a lot of the themes he returned to in a broader, more public setting post-match at Ewood Park. And certainly for anybody who maybe hadn't been at that trust event, I thought it was an excellent performance in terms of really hitting the right notes, reflecting the angst and the difficult element in terms of the fan reaction, and knowing that was something that would be the case, and dealing with that, but also clearly mapping out the business case for that. And that's why I think it needed to be said. It needed to come. We obviously had the words in terms of the digital statement the club put on the official channels from Ben Napper, but actually to have a face there in front of the camera and a key player in this decision, both in terms of the footballing dimension, the financial dimension, to knit that together. And then I thought the real clever part of that message was to wrap it around just coming off the back of that performance, that group of players leaving that dressing room. Those are the types of attributes Liam Manning wants for the journey that he's trying to take Norwich on. Clearly, he didn't feel Marcelino Nunez was displaying those attributes, wanting to be part of it, wanting to be, as he quoted, all in. So he doesn't want him on the journey. Why do you want that type of figure in the camp? And I think Norwich fans would probably agree wholeheartedly with that. If they're going to achieve anything this season against the odds in many respects, if you look at the financial disparity with, we have to say it, clubs like Ipswich who come down armed with parachute money, then you're going to have to. There's going to have to be intangibles that try and broker or narrow the deficit, maybe in terms of the financial power that these other clubs have. You could even throw Wrexham and Birmingham maybe into that equation. And those intangibles clearly are, at the risk of repeating what I said previously, the cultures and the behaviours. Why would you want an unhappy player? A player who, with his representatives, even before Liam Manning has gone in the building, which is another part of his answer, yes, they confirmed that, had indicated, look, I don't want to play in the Championship. I don't want to play for Norwich in the Championship. I'm not interested in a new deal. And as Liam Manning said, so that they were quite an element of surprise when his camp then presented this Ipswich proposal. So he remains in the Championship, and he remains in geographically very close proximity to Norwich, but it's a world away from where Liam Manning is trying to drive this now in terms of the players that he wants. And also as well, I was quite keen to dig in at the end of that answer to the point that I think we debated went on the initial reaction video on the Wednesday night about, you take Nunez out of that central midfield mix, is that a major hit to the creativity element? And Liam Manning was very clear. No, he is very happy with the profile of midfielders he has in that area now. McLean, Topic, Matson, Gibbs, to name four there. And he certainly doesn't feel losing Nunez in terms of the creativity and the purely footballing dimension of this is necessarily a negative to what he's trying to achieve in that area of his team and the blend he's trying to get. And if that is the case, so Liam Manning is of the opinion we're not going to miss him on a footballing sense, and the footballing and the financial elements, which 7.5 guaranteed, rising potentially to 10 for a player with 11 months left. And then you add on that final element that he didn't want to be here, he didn't want to play for Norwich, he was looking for pastures new. Then even allowing for you baking in then the Ipswich dimension, I think Liam Manning hit the perfect note, the perfect tone, because he didn't dismiss that. He clearly made it abundantly evident that whether you're Ben Napper, whether you're Zoe Webber, the other people on the executive, people above them clearly in terms of the American ownership, or you're Liam Manning and his coaching staff, they knew full well the reaction and how this would play out with the fan base. They wasn't immune to it. They didn't disregard it. No, they baked it into the equation. And as Liam said, they take the responsibility that they have and the roles that they've got very seriously. They're not oblivious to how this would have played out. But pulling all those strands together, they felt, to then go back to Ben Napper's club statement, it was in the best interest of the club in the short, the medium and the longer term. And I thought it was interesting, Sam has obviously spoken face-to-face with a lot of the fans who were there at Ewood Park yesterday, outside the stadium. And I think the general view was maybe slightly disconnected from maybe that initial social media angst and anger about unforgivable, how could you sell to Ipswich, your arch rivals? I think there was and maybe it was the passage of time, albeit a day or two, but there was a real acceptance, a realism, a pragmatism that, yes, this is good business, and he didn't want to be here, so we don't want him. And that was the sentiment that Liam then echoed post-match. And I think that is put to bed now for me in terms of the initial act in this drama. Of course, if Nunez goes on and starts to be an influential figure in an Ipswich team who rise from where they are currently in the table and are really in the race for promotion, then that'll always be there. That narrative clearly will always be there. They're not going to airbrush that out. But far bigger and far more important is where Liam Manning is taking this Norwich group, and if the evidence of the first 4 games and then more recently what we saw at Ewood Park is anything to go by, then I don't think Norwich are going to be the poor relation this season. I think they're going to have as good a go maybe as Ipswich attacking that top 6. So if that is the case, then it won't be portrayed as a decision which doesn't stack up footballing wise, doesn't stack up in terms of allegiance, and doesn't stack up financially. But time will maybe tell on that. But I don't think Liam Manning could have performed in terms of what he said any better. I thought he got the tone perfect and got that, as he said, the balance between the emotional element of this episode and then also the pragmatic financial realism. As he said, that those funds will now allow Norwich to improve the squad moving forward in future windows, maybe improve the infrastructure if they want to do that, improve the academy you talked about. And as you said, it's an unbelievable fee for a player with 11 months left. And I don't think anybody, Ipswich or not Ipswich, as the end destination, would disagree with that.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think just to I guess conclude this element of it, which is, you mapped out maybe the positive example of him going to Ipswich. Well, flip that, and if time shows that Nunez doesn't perform and Ipswich don't get it going, they've paid 10 million quid for a player who's got 10 months left on his deal. And, I think we saw, look, and I'm not trying to, it's not one of those, he wasn't very good anyway type of comments, but there was inconsistency at Norwich. There were the highs and the moments and the brilliant free kicks and the brilliant goals and the brilliant bits of play that contributed to that creativity. But there was the flip side of that, which was when, times got a little bit tough. He sometimes did go missing in games. And I think barring the second half of the season under David Wagner, there wasn't that consistent kind of run in form that maybe prevented him from elevating himself to a level where Premier League clubs wanted to pick up the phone and take him, for example. So, yeah, I think time is going to be key in terms of how this is judged. And it ultimately feels like another one that Norwich City, another East Anglian battle that Norwich City are going to have to win, as they have done for the last 16 years. We're going to put that in a box now and leave it for, I would imagine, until the first East Anglian derby of the season. Because the reality is, Paddy, I think if you started the summer and, we just sat down on these podcasts and I would have said to you, right, Norwich are going to lose Borja Sainz, they're going to lose Marcelino Nunez, but Josh Sargent stays in the building. I think we'd have all taken that, wouldn't we?
Where do I sign, Connor? Yeah, absolutely. You would. And again, so much of this episode, that episode, it's just the end point. And that's why, as Liam Manning said, the price was so high, because it is very unusual that a player with that length of time on his contract, as Liam made the point, January comes around, he could be talking to overseas clubs, he could be engineering a free agent transfer this time next summer. Very, very rarely, certainly in championship transfers, it's probably unique in that regard, would a player in his contractual status depart for that amount of money, guaranteed up front, plus potentially more in terms of
just sorry to jump in, but just put that in perspective. Yeah. I remember people telling us at the start of the summer, it'd be great if we could get our money back on Marcelino Nunez, which was three and a half. Didn't really kind of see a world where maybe they would be able to push that fee much north of that. And we sit here having been in a world where they've got more than double that. And that's why, of course, there's the emotional aspect, and you have to view that from a footballing perspective for all of the reasons that we outlined. But equally, and again, I don't want to keep pouring over it, which we are, but it is hard to negate that kind of financial impact and financial level that only Ipswich Town would have brought to the table.
Yeah, and also, I mean, to knit it to your point here, that if that scale of deal has over and above, the science money clearly as well, one or two other little bits and pieces, I'm thinking of John Rowe, sort of a little uplift they got. If all of those elements in terms of this very delicate financial balance that they're having to tread within the parameters of now ownership, who don't come from a standpoint, we need to sell to survive, we need to sell to keep our heads above water. That isn't the driver. But equally, what hasn't changed from the previous ownership to now is they have to be self-funded, they have to be self-financed. Player trading remains a key pillar. So it's not we have to sell to keep our heads above water, but they need to sell. Otherwise, this model doesn't work from a financial point of view. It doesn't work in terms of enticing Gabby Zara, for example. He's the perfect example. Come from South America, we'll give you the platform, we'll give you the exposure, you perform. That'll be good for us in the short term, hopefully, if things came together and, there wasn't that many steps from maybe getting themselves through the playoffs and in the Premier League. If not, you'll go on to maybe bigger and better at this stage. And that, if you start to stop selling in terms of that sense of the player aspect, then you're not going to get that grade of player coming and being willing at that stage of their careers to come and play for Norwich City. So it's a very fine, very calibrated area, this, for Norwich in terms of player trading. And, that's why I think to be able, as I say, with the caveat that we're still a few hours out from the window, and as Liam said, he didn't want to give any sound bites that, put him onto a footing that looks a little bit silly with the fullness of time. But keeping Sargent in the building, if they've been able to do that with the broader canvas of funds for Nunez, funds for science, then it's as he underlined, Ewood, as he's shown already this season, 6 goals in 5. That would represent, I think, in that strand of the transfer window. We don't even need to get into the actual incomings that they've made, but in that strand of the crown jewels, if you want to call them that, I think that's by some measure the best outcome that could have happened. Because for the simple reason, as good as Ballhard Science was for a brief spell this time last year, Josh Sargent is indispensable. Those three, and probably any other player in this current squad. So to be able to retain his services moving forward on the pitch is, well, it goes without saying, it's absolutely massive. So, yeah, if you package it in those terms, then absolutely, yeah, you would have. I can't think there would have been a Norwich fan who would have given the choice. You can have Sargent going and you keep the other two, or Science going, or Sargent or staying, or Nunez going, and that equation very much would have settled, I think, for the universal volume of Norwich's fan base in Sargent. We'll keep him in the building and we'll let the other two go, because you would hope that in terms of moving it on to the inward business, that a player like Quistgaard and a player like Papagiallo could in time emerge as the replacement for a Science, and then in those midfield areas, Nunez, come in Maatsen, come in Topic. So, that's why I think that a lost Sargent, Quistgaard may have emerged as that focal point, but he's still new to England. He's still finding his way. I just don't think they could have gone to market and as they would have had to do, and found anybody for the value they could have committed to anywhere near as guarantee of championship output as that man is. And for that reason, yeah, I think if you're Ben Napper, you're faced with, you can only keep one of these three before, the window had opened in the summer. You're thinking, well, it's probably unlikely, but can we keep Josh Sargent? Well, as it's turned out, that looks like the way it's going to turn out.
Yeah, and if they did lose him now, I think we're all in agreement. It would be a complete and utter disaster for what they want to achieve. Because irrespective of how well they may or may not play, having this man at the top end of the pitch just elevates them to a completely different level. And I think you saw it yesterday, Pat. I'm probably going to say something a little bit controversial. I didn't actually think it was his best game in front of goal. I mean, you look at the shots that he had at Ewood Park before he stepped up to take the penalty. He had 5 efforts on goal. I think all of those, there was the header, there was the one that he put over the bar. There was enough there that, and for example, the goal that he scored in terms of XG per shot, he amassed 3 shots bigger than that in those 5 that he missed. So I think he would maybe be a little bit frustrated he didn't take those. But equally, it shows his importance, doesn't it? The fact he can have a performance like that, walk away with 2 goals, and Norwich City walk away with 3 points. And that kind of underscores the point I was going to put to you, what you said right at the start. Forget best striker in the league. Is there an argument that he's now among, if not the best championship player?
Well, I just think that's such a subjective debate, really, isn't it? Because, you're putting him in a conversation with players who don't play necessarily in the same area of the pitch. So what's the criteria, across different units of a team? Middlesbrough have had a very good start, and I like some of their midfielders particularly. I think they're probably better than championship grade. Flip it that way. Is he undisputably better than championship grade? And the answer is yes. So therefore, he probably has to be in the conversation for he is the best in the championship. But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. I don't want to count on any chickens, but he stays for the entire season. He stays fit, clear of injury, and he continues at this phenomenal output. You're in Mitrovic levels, then rest assured he would be crowned the championship player of the season. Of that, I have no doubt, and it probably would translate into Norwich going very close, if not getting up as well. So, yeah, again, it's one of those debates for settling probably towards the end of the season. But yeah, I mean, Ishmael Valerian, Ishmael, the Blackburn manager, more or less said, well, that's why those type of players are so coveted. That's why the top teams want players like that in their side, because they make the difference. In a tight game, he called it a 50-50 type game, and you could kind of see where he's coming from, I suppose. And Liam Manning's talked about those very fine margins that decide most championship games. There's a player who can tip the odds in your favour, and those players are quite a small commodity within the Championship, I would argue. So, yeah, he's very much in that bracket. And, yeah, I mean, on those chances, I think Liam Manning pretty much tongue-in-cheek said that to him immediately after the game, that, well, 2 goals is good, but how many did you leave out there? And caveated it by saying, on another day, he knows if he gets those chances again, it'll be a different story, because he is so good. He is so good. And, you also have to highlight, and Liam Manning did, that to get into those chances, it's his movement, it's his trigger movement as well, just those first yard or two of explosive pace to get the other side, as we saw for the penalty that he earned. He just, in a flash, he was the wrong side of McLaughlin, and he had to take evasive action. How he rolls defenders as well. That's a marked feature of his craft now. 2 or 3 of those chances, the goal itself, the second goal, rolling defenders, his body weight, his physicality, the physique. We've talked about how he's changed and filled out, and power, the power he brings now in his frame. All these elements mean he is, I don't think it's a stretch to say he probably is a complete striker at this level. Yes, of course, that question mark will persist until he goes and does it at a higher level. But he can play outside the box, he can play back to goal, he can link the play, he can come deep, he can run in behind, in the air, either foot. Really,
outside the box, inside the box.
Where is the weakness? Where are the weaknesses? If you had to dissect and decode Josh Sargent's Championship game now, Championship profile, I'm struggling really to pinpoint an area where you think, well, he's good in many areas, but he's a little bit weak. So that tells you, and he's now reaching the point in his career where he's amassed that level of game time and experience, and he's probably at the peak of his physical powers as well. So it's a perfect storm, really, and it's Norwich who are reaping the dividends. And, let's just maybe navigate this first 24 hours, get this window out of the way, and then we'll see where we are come January. But there's no doubt. Yeah, I mean, certainly any club, any media type with a focus on the Championship, any set of fans who want to debate brackets, Championship's best player, I am sure, would be in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of stats off the back of yesterday. The first, of course, is that he's moved his way up. We spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, up that all-time Norwich City record goal scorers list. He was joint 24th ahead of the game at Ewood Park. He's now leapfrogged over Hugh Curran, who was on 53, and he's joined a certain Wes Hoolahan in 22nd on 54 goals in 136 games. It's quite an incredible record. His next targets are Tommy Bryceland, Ron Ashman. So he's really coming into, and that would then take him into the top 20 if he could do that. He only needs another 2 to get in there, which I think it shows a remarkable rate of progress in what he's doing. And like we say, if that scenario does unfold, if he is at Norwich City for the rest of the season, if he stays injury free, he's got a real opportunity now of getting in that top 10 for me at the very least, where he kind of meets John Dee and Ralph Hunt, Grant Holt, etc. The second one, I'm going to phrase a little bit of a quiz for you, Paddy, which is, and this is courtesy of NCFC numbers on X. Norwich, so you might have seen it, in which case we'll ditch the quiz, but if you haven't, then I'll pose it to you. Norwich City have had 3 players since the Second World War to score 5 goals in the first 4 league games of a season. Josh Sargent is one. Who are the other 2? And I'll give you a clue. They are.
Well, I can guess. I'm assuming John Rosie or one of the others.
No.
John Rowe. What did that start last season? Was that not 5 in 4?
No, I don't think so. Obviously not. No.
Okay, go on. Yeah, I'll need a clue then.
So I'll give you the seasons. So one of the seasons was 98-99, and one of the seasons was 1920. I'd expect you to get probably that one.
1920.
Yeah. As in 2019-20. Sorry, not as in 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. Yeah, 2019-20. Well, 2019-20. Oh well, yeah, that would be the GOAT.
Yeah.
Clearly, was that was the first Premier League season? No, it was. Was it the 18-19? That was the first Premier League season.
Premier League. Yeah.
Newcastle hat trick, wasn't it? I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And the other one was 98-99.
Yeah.
It's after Kevin Drinkle's time, so not Big Ewan, was it?
Oh no, you got the country right though.
Bellas.
You are correct. Yeah. So that in itself is some high esteem to be in with those two players since the Second World War, and I think since 1990 as well. He's it's only what you and Grant Holt and Timo Pukki that have scored more goals for Norwich City than him, which is quite remarkable. Obviously, Wes Hoolahan having got the same amount. So those are some really, in recent Norwich City history, some remarkable names to be associated with on any level. Paddy, just very, very quickly, because I want to move on to other stuff away from Josh Sargent. But as you said, we've got, what was it, as you said, about 30 hours to go in the window. What's the figure now that if you're on Ben Napper, what is the figure now that would make you think about even contemplating a sale at this stage of Josh Sargent? What would that number need to be?
Well, I feel like we're almost sort of traversing the Nunez debate again, because they'd be the financial number, but also there's the footballing aspect of that, because how do you feasibly go to market as the clock ticks down? And of course, they'll have, as we know, they're very strategic in their planning. But I mean, the sense was there a week or two back that a lot of those targets in a world where Sargent had departed, maybe at the Wolfsburg time of writing earlier in the summer, they've moved on now, so they're off the list. So you're going lower and lower down the list, and that's then knowing that at this stage of the window there'll be huge price inflation for when Norwich go to market. So the net effect there isn't probably going to be something that they would bridge in this. So there's the footballing dimension for me, which would preclude doing anything. But then, as has been shown, the delicate balance with Nunez, when it got to 7.5 rising to 10, those numbers made sense and offset. Not as we've said already, not masked or trampled on the fan feeling around that because it was Ipswich, but maybe got to a financial figure that was more palatable, shall we say, to consider sanctioning the first senior player in 24 years to move over the border. So, well, I mean, we have conversations all the time with the people who matter inside the club, and I think there's a sense, even at 30 million now, that would be, quote, difficult, as it was explained to us yesterday at Ewood Park. So, if that's the internal view, 30 million is a difficult number, then, as I say, you'd almost base
record. Do you think we'd be in record territory? Do you think it's that's what it would need to be? That's Buendia at the moment, isn't it?
Levels, yeah. I think it would have to be. Yeah, it would have to be. And then as I say, to pick up the previous point, then you've got a devilish challenge. I mean, you could maybe think that Chris Garden is now in the building, adapted, acclimatized, and could push on. But there's a huge element of risk there, and they would clearly have to do something. Would they go Premier League loan route, at least till January, to give them a little breathing space, but a Premier League loan that would take some serious millions probably in terms of loan fee and committing to a salary payment to bring them in. I'm not sure which players would fall into that bracket, if I'm honest. Premier League grade strikers who are willing to drop out into the Championship. So, but yeah, if we almost park what on earth would they do to replace him element of the equation, and what would it take financially from a business sense? I think you are in Buendia territory. Yeah, that's not a bad comparative for me.
Yeah, well, that's all right, because he's in Darren Huckabee's wine cellar, isn't he? And make sure all the phones are disconnected at Colney and Carrow Road over the course of the next 30 hours.
All I would say there, Connor, though, is, and it certainly wouldn't rule anything out, but at some point in very short order, if he's not already on a plane, he's going to be heading to the US because he's in their squad for 2 friendlies. And you would imagine that early part of the week, maybe even, in the next 24, 48 hours, he is stateside. So, there's a straw to cling to. Physically, if he's not even this side of the water, then how does the deal get put together of the scale that would merit every fitness-related element certainly being very copper-bottomed and transparent? It's not a loan that you could engineer where the medical aspect of that isn't as important. There's no club going to commit to 35+ million without Josh Sargent having gone through all those painstaking checks that you need to do, and that's even before you then get to the point where the numbers make sense, club to club and club to player and representatives. So many elements of that. It's hard to see how that could accelerate with the added element that he's not physically going to be this side of the water. So that, I think, probably not ideal when he gets over there and plays, and heaven forbid anything happens to him in terms of fitness and injury. I'm not talking that up, but it might not be the worst scenario that he's actually out of sight and out of mind a little bit, hopefully, over these next hours, shall we say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he's tapped the badge now, so all is fine, and he's going to be a Norwich player, hopefully, come the end of the transfer window at 7 p.m. on Monday. Let's move on from him, Pad, because obviously we've done a big segment on him and his brilliance and how he won Norwich City the game, and he absolutely did do that. But of course, it would be remiss of us, I think, to miss out Vladan Kovacevic at the other end, who, as he did at Portsmouth, made two really key interventions to ensure at 1-0 to ensure that Norwich City walked away with not just 3 points but also a crucial clean sheet. Look, he's mad, he's bonkers to watch, and there are times where his positioning is blood pressure inducing, and some of the passes he plays, you have to almost wince when he plays them. And he's definitely, and I'll put money on this, and probably quite a decent sum of money, he's definitely going to get lobbed from the halfway line at some point this season, as Ahashi tried to do in the first half.
Portman Road, Connor, will be all right. Can you imagine that?
Let's not even comprehend that. But he's got this sort of mad genius to him, hasn't he? When those moments come up and those big saves have to be made. So far, he's proven that he can make them. I mean, that double save, and if not us, I was listening to Joe Lewis on BBC Radio Norfolk this morning, and he described it as a world-class double save, and he is much better qualified than us to talk about goalkeeping. But yeah, the way he got his body big, the agility to get up from the first one after having to get down to that header initially, just an unbelievable piece of goalkeeping.
Yeah, I mean, I put it in my rating segment. I mean, it was very Peter Schmeichel-esque, who, father of Casper if you're of a certain age, but anybody who's aware of that dominant United era, culminating in that European Cup win in '99, he was the best keeper in the world at that point. And that trademark, I mean, they used to call it like the starfish, how the arms and the legs come out in a coordinated manner, and just any part of his body that could keep the ball out of the net. And that was the second part of the double follow-up, very much reminiscent of that. I think it almost comes off his underarm on his right and goes behind him. But to make yourself that big that quickly to get up off the floor, I mean, the first save was spot on. But to go again, I mean, keepers obviously work on that. You see a lot of the drills that emerge on club feeds, and it's that rat-a-tat-tat. But that's fine in a training sense. But to do it in the white heat of, as I say, Blackburn were really pushing at that point, and momentum is such a big thing. And it bookends with Portsmouth away, where he made that brilliant save, scrambling across his line to keep out. I think it was a volley within 6-7 yards out, and within a minute they got up the other end. And I think it was it the second goal that day? Or was the first goal? It was certainly a Norwich goal. I think it might be the second one, actually. Sargent bundling home. So on games of football, turn big moments, big keepers step up in big moments, and he, even in this small sample, is that. But as you rightly say, Connor, he comes with a few other elements to his craft that maybe not quite as impressive. And I think you just accept that he plays on the edge. He's a high tariff goalkeeper. He's a modern sweeper keeper, and he takes that art
he pushes the limit, doesn't he?
To the purest form, certainly. Yeah, certainly to any other Norwich keeper I can recall. He's so comfortable outside his area. But, some of his passing so far has put Norwich in trouble, has been a little bit tardy. And those are elements he's going to have to work on because, you're right. There's already been one or two close shaves. The Middlesbrough game, he was fortunate on a couple of occasions yesterday as well, that first half effort. And it will subject him to, beyond maybe the Norwich part of the footballing fraternity, but there will be, I'm sure, fans of other clubs will look at that if that comes to pass and think this is a calamity keeper, a clown keeper. What is he doing? But I think you can already see the positive elements of his craft. Have basically got the win at Portsmouth and basically got the win at Blackburn, and that isn't a bad trait to have in a goalkeeper. That in the clutch moments you can rely on him, and he'll step up and probably pull off saves that maybe a vast majority of championship keepers won't be able to do. And that will outweigh maybe those moments where, it'll be head in hands and what has he done, and why can't you just stay inside his box? You're not getting that with Vladan Kovacevic. They've signed a keeper who is very much part of the build-up structure and the deep build-up phases. And so if you are of a nervous disposition, then you might need to just bear that in mind anytime you turn up, particularly at Carrow Road maybe, and you see your keeper that far out of his area and then turning over the ball as he did in that Middlesbrough game. And if he could you just hope over time, the work that he does with Tony Roberts and the other goalkeepers, that he could just eradicate those areas that at the moment are a little bit frayed, shall we say, around the edges, and he's just better. And he makes better decisions, and the percentage of passes that he does outside the box are completed rather than, probably at the moment that the balance is wrong, and he's coughing up too many of those opportunities and big opportunities. And you're right, and it's inevitable. He will get punished. Norwich will get punished. So I think, he's fun. He's fun, and I love the reaction. I mean, I didn't know what he was doing when he reappeared on his own at the end of the final whistle, but as you
I just presumed he was like seeking out a family member or something at the end, because a lot of the away end had emptied at that point.
Yeah. No, I just looked up from, it's obviously a very frenetic final whistle for us and what we do, and looked up and he stood there facing whatever was left of the away end and on his own. And but as we know, this is his clean sheet MO and how he celebrates a clean sheet. So it'd be lovely to feel there's one of those incoming at Carrow Road, because then he could treat the home fans to just a little spot of togetherness between them and their number one. So. But also, you've seen the club footage, when all the players were there at the final whistle. I mean, he was joining in. He's already learned the words to some of these songs, and the passion that he was delivering those phrases as well. You just thought, this is a guy you want in your team. This is a guy you want on your side. And you saw his reaction in the immediate aftermath of that double save. He was pumped. And Kenny McLean, who likes an emotional celebration, he was straight to him, and there was a bit of a hug there before the resulting corner, and that's just great to see. That's just great. If you're a Norwich fan and you're seeing your keeper all in, to use that Liam Manning phrase, you've got to love that. You've got to love to see that emotion in one of your players, and that it means that much. We might have to suffer maybe on occasion with him in terms of giving the ball away in dangerous situations, but. I think if this 4-game sample is representative and replicated over the entirety of the championship season, there'll be far more highlights on his show reel than bloopers.
Yeah, well, look at the 2 championship away games. I think there's an argument that his contributions have led to Norwich City taking maximum points at Fratton Park and now Ewood Park as well. And yeah, he's. I know he's been kind of labelled Big Vlad, hasn't he? I think we need to add a Mad in there. It needs to be a Big Mad Vlad. I think it is the name, because he's just as we maybe associate with goalkeepers. There's that saying, isn't there? You have to be a little bit mad to be willing to stand in a goal and have people pelt balls at you. So maybe that just comes with the trade. But he seems particularly full of personality. Should we say? I think Liam Manning described him as a madman. Ben Krezene said he was even madder off the pitch. So goodness knows what on earth that looks like, but clearly made a big impression on the group. Other honourable mentions, Packers. I don't think we're going to get through all of them, but I thought Antti Sienats was more positive on Saturday. Ben Krezene, I've been really impressed with this season. He looks, I don't want to use the word transformed, that feels a little bit over-egging it, but he looks really improved, I think, on what we've seen last season when we've seen him. Liam Gibbs' cameo, I thought, was important as well at shoring it up. Kenny McLean, I felt, added real balance. And I guess all of this that we've discussed in so many minutes in the previous podcast this season. We've spoken about 3 at the back and formations. It was a change. It was a marked change. Norwich went to a 4. Part of that saw Kenny McLean. I guess in many ways it was quite similar to the David Wagner role that he had, where he dropped in between centre backs that allowed them to push Ben Krezene a little bit higher. It just felt like, probably balance is the word. It felt like a team, and this again isn't necessarily about formations, because it's maybe about the selections that were made and the profiles and the blend of profiles they had on the pitch at the time. But it just felt, particularly first half, with the chances they created, it looked a much more cohesive outfit than probably what they have done at any other point in the championship this season.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, I think. Yeah, I mean, Medic was the standout for me in terms of that feeling that maybe he'd been put into areas of the pitch which have exposed him. And there was one particularly instance where Mirko Topic has overhit a pass. He's kind of just inside his own half, but he's had the turn. He's got 5 yards on Ryan Hedges. He beats him for pace, but he does see that out. I think he either conceded a goal kick or a corner, but it didn't come to anything. But you thought, well, again, that's not an area of pitch Jakov Medic clearly is comfortable in. But that aside, I thought because he was playing in more of a nominal 2 and his area of expertise was kind of the width of the 18-yard box, that allowed him to play within his comfort zone. For me, he wasn't exposed. And what you also saw, I thought, for the first time was the accuracy of his passing, his long-range diagonal passing.
That one into Chris Warren was sensational.
I know, but there was 3 or 4 instances where he's 40, 50-yard diagonals, and I wasn't sure that was something that he had in his toolkit. But the repeatable accuracy of that yesterday at Ewood tells me that he can spark the play just as well as a Kenny McLean, maybe for example, as you rightly said, dropped into that area of the pitch as well. So that was, for me, if I was settling on one player to underline the kind of the sense that suited their eye better compared to what we've seen so far, then it was Medic. But we're not going to open it up this formations debate again. I think it's just worth reiterating that Liam Manning has talked about what he's looking for is players in the right spaces, the right areas of the pitch, and what that looks like in terms of a base formation, in possession, out of possession, is very fluid, and we all just have to buy into that. And it's actually about getting players in the right spaces of the pitch. Medic, an example of that. As you said, I thought Ben Kraseni played that dual role far better than Cordoba has done. That ball, it was about 25 minutes in, he's cut to the byline like Papagiallo or a very, very good winger, cut the ball back. Sargent 6 yards out, rises above his man. He just mistimed it. The ball's gone over the bar. Jose Cordoba, for me, doesn't produce that action. He doesn't get to the byline. He doesn't produce that cross. So Ben Kraseni there, that looked a better balance. I thought Kellen Fisher was intelligent and how he played the role 4 out of possession, tucking in, more like a wing back, offering that width on the right-hand side. 1 or 2 good interactions with Antti Cernach, who, again, talking about players occupying areas of the pitch they're comfortable in. He looked far better on that right-hand side, integral role with a flick on for the penalty incident. So, and then to top it was Quisgaard in and around Sargent, both in terms of Sargent, how that maybe aided him and took a little bit of focus away from him in terms of Blackburn's defence, but also Quisgaard, because you got him close enough that he could, for me, display his strongest suit, which is attacking the box. There was 1 or 2 instances. There was a header he had tipped over, or I think the assistance flag was up, but he is quite clearly very comfortable in and around the penalty box, and that blend with Sargent could be really exciting for me if everything goes to plan over these next few hours in terms of Sargent. But you left there, and I'd agree. Of the 4 league games, that was the one you left thinking, I liked that blend. I liked where the players were being placed. I liked what they were being asked to do, and for me, that isn't we've been saying that we should play 4 at the back. I think that was just an awareness of, no, this is far more nuanced than it's 4, it's 3. It's actually about, like a Medic, like a Quisgaard, and like a Kraseni, maybe just now with each passing game, each passing block of training, Liam Manning and his coaching staff distilling and deciphering who are the better players to play in those areas of the pitch, and then you can wrap around that the formation if you wish. But that's certainly not, as Liam said, it wasn't, they lost the games they lost because they played a 3 as opposed to a 4. It was maybe, those individual errors which probably come from players being asked to do things they're not comfortable with in areas of the pitch they're not comfortable with. I think they got that right yesterday as a collective.
Yeah, agreed. And it's about, as you say, making players comfortable. And again, as much as we talk about players learning roles, it's about coaches learning players as well. And Liam Manning and his coaching team have got to go on that journey. I mean, we flashed this graphic up against Portsmouth. So this was, again, apologies to the audio listeners, but this is the average position graph from who scored yesterday. So again, we kind of talk about formations, and I think we kind of brushed it as a 4-4-2, which you can kind of make out there. You can see the back 4 in kind of a horseshoe shape. You can see the midfield 4. But, look at that shape. I mean, that to me, if you were going to grade it, looks more like a 4-2-3-1, doesn't it, on paper? So I think it goes to show that actually trying to classify formations a lot of the time is completely futile. I think a few things I would highlight from this is probably the balance on either side. I think there's been points where, because of the way that Jack Stacey plays, and it's not a criticism of him, but he's uber aggressive. He wants to be very vertical, and that's often meant Sienats has drifted too far inside. You look at the position between Sienats and Fisher, they're much closer, feels much more cohesive. And then on the flip side of that, look where Crisene and Diallo are as well, and how high they were able to get Ben Crisene up. Just a better balance about the players they've got in each half and the way that will work. You mentioned Chris Goran's position. I mean, look how deep he is in respective to Sargent. Sienats in a much better area. I think all of this, Pad, just underscores what you were saying there. Players in better positions that feels like it suits them a hell of a lot more, which is ultimately what the Liam Manning mantra is. It's not about formations. It's about the occupying of space, but also about ensuring that players are in a position where they can really exercise their strengths.
Yeah, well, they won't believe it's kind of. It's almost like you told me that graph was going to go up there with my explanation. Maybe I'm in the wrong line of work. What do you think? Maybe not. Maybe not. People are screaming at their screens / radios / whatever device they're consuming this. But what I would add though is particularly Chris Gordon, because I think he came off. It was certainly before the 55th minute mark. For Marcondes, and when I put that to Liam, I mistakenly attributed it to, here's a player who we know that he joined up pretty late in terms of pre-season. They've just managed him through. Was that kind of, again, more a substitution based on managing that guy's load? And no, I think Liam more or less shot that one down and said it was actually a response to maybe how Blackburn had adapted what they were doing. I mean, they made some changes clearly in personnel and also approach to offset maybe losing the player before half time. And maybe Liam felt that Marcondes was a better profile to have then in and around Sargent. There was one particularly good link up with Jallo actually on the left hand side, and that underlines the nuance and in terms of course it's about the formation that starts the game and the players within that formation, but equally when these games are so finely poised, it's the in-game alterations, both in personnel, both in formation, and I'm sure if you'd have called up the graphic with Marcondes, that he would have had maybe a slightly different position to Quistguard in relation to Sargent, which maybe did reflect that second half period where Norwich had to weather a lot of out of possession type work. And I thought it was interesting on that graph though that Topic and McLean, they were very close together, and I think there was some good signs there of already, and that was the first time I think they'd been paired in tandem in the Championship. And I'd agree. I thought Kenny McLean played his part very well, very composed. That leadership Liam Manning highlighted again after the game, the composure, certainly in those difficult moments. Now, there's a player who clearly has been over this course and distance many a time. And that probably will aid Topic, who I'm sure is still on this crash course of learning about the Championship and all that entails, and to have a player alongside him. And, of course, now Matson to drop into the mix. And as you rightly said, I thought Liam Gibbs showed up quite well in his cameo as well. So, I think this part of what we've discussed, for me, does settle on a head coach and a coaching staff on the same journey as their players learning about Liam Manning and what he wants and the demands he's placing on them. But also the flip of that, and Liam Manning and his coaching staff with each additional piece of empirical evidence in a game state situation or just training, learning about their players and learning which ones are probably better suited at this stage, certainly, to carry out his instructions. And as he has said liberally, that for them, it isn't painting numbers and you will go to this area of the pitch. In this part of the game, you need to be here. A proactive, almost top-down approach. They're trying to empower players to make decisions for themselves on the pitch, to sense a game state and then react rather than look over to the sidelines and where do we go, Gaffer? What are we supposed to be doing here? And maybe, again, we're now seeing the elements of this squad who are able to take that on board quicker than some other players. And what does that lead to? It leads to the cohesiveness that we saw for certainly the first, I'd say, maybe 50 minutes of that game. Before then, it became more of a battle and an endurance test. But there's no doubt there was, in possession, territorially, the fluidity, the structure, the interchange of how they progressed the ball, all of those elements in that first 45, certainly at Ewood Park, felt like, maybe this evolutionary process that Liam Manning has talked about. But within that, now getting to the point where it's tipping into control, but also with that chance creation, clear-cut chances, and then taking a chance as they did. And that then changed the game completely. In comparison, of course, to Middlesbrough, to Southampton, where they had that element of control in both those first halves, turnover errors, fell behind, and then it's a different game. And at this stage, it's quite evident. At this stage of the cycle, when they go behind, maybe they find that a bit of an insurmountable challenge. But that, even in itself, I'm sure, as this grows and develops, that they'll get better at as well, because they've got the evidence now of, well, we didn't deal very well with that against the likes of Middlesbrough, against Southampton. We know maybe what we need to do the next time that situation presents itself. So, yeah, I'll go back to, I think it was pre-Southampton, when I think we were talking with Liam about more so the two central midfield attacking players, the two tens, if you like, behind Sargent. He admitted candidly that hasn't really fired yet. How do you get to that point? And he came back with one word: time. It just needs time. Time on the pitch, training-wise, time in games. And now we're maybe getting to this point where they've had enough time that we're starting to see the evidence of it where it matters, which is, trying to win championship games of football.
Yeah, and that is certainly what they're going to get over the next couple of weeks, time on the training pitch, which is certainly not what you get when the championship season is in full swing. And like we said, Paddy, it feels like, we speak about this group learning and growing, and I think there is a sense of that. You actually, and you guys can't see it, I can see it, but basically because we've got the Portsmouth one in here that we used a couple of weeks ago, you can see the differences in position, how much higher they are up and on the pitch, how much more proactive probably their play was at Blackburn, and you compare that in the space of a couple of weeks. They won both games, and yeah, okay, I accept the second half it wasn't great. It was a bit nervy. They maybe got caught a little bit, as I think you can do against 10 men, of, well, do we hold or do we push? And they kind of in the end did neither, and ended up with, particularly, and again, not criticism of Marcondes, but I think it's more about the way the game changed. After that sub, it became like their purposeful possession in the first half came a bit more passive, I felt, and it became a bit more keep bally, which is, again, just maybe indicative that initially that when they have that plan and they have that game plan to attack, they go and do that really well. Then the opponent responds to that. And maybe what this group is just lacking is that next bit, which is to counteract to kind of counterpunch in many ways, and learning actually what do we need to do to overcome once the team has made adaptations. And that is the next bit, probably, it feels like, for this Norwich group, which lends us on, Paddy, to, I guess, probably the final point of the pod, really, which is after the international break, it's a trip to your mob and Coventry. Then it's Wrexham. As we said, I think at some point during the last hour and 2 minutes that we've been recording, the next challenge for this group is to put run of results together. That it can be so important in this league, in terms of, we all know you put 2-3 wins together and it can elevate your position in the table. That's not relevant at the moment, but just in terms of momentum and feel-good factor. And, for all of the reasons that we said, it's been a tough week. It was an important win, but actually if they win their next 2 games, it will do little. So it's now about trying to get some more momentum behind this Liam Manning project and these players as well, who obviously we've touched upon over the last hour or so.
Yeah, as you're talking there, Con, I just wanted to call up the championship table. I mean, 24 teams there. I think I've got my maths right. 4 teams. One team now with an unbeaten record after 4 games, and it just shows you. We've talked about this on various platforms, but that evenness this season feels to be the case. I don't think there's going to be even the season where Leeds, Ipswich, and was it Sunderland. The seasons all merge for me, but a clump of 3 or 4 pull away. I don't think that's probably going to happen this season as well. It doesn't feel to me, if you look across more broadly the league and the results, QPR get whacked at Coventry 7 and then they beat Charlton. Such a swing, such a lurch from one week to the next, from one game to the next. So within that context, your point about if you get any, like Middlesbrough have shown, if you can actually start to string 3 or 4 wins, but if not 3 or 4 unbeaten games together, you can find yourself up and around the top end of the table very swiftly. I mean, as it stands now, despite the difficulties at Carrow Road in the league, they're still only 3 points out of the sort of 3rd and 4th places, as much as that matters a jot after so few games played. But that will be the key. That will be the key. And I go back, and I'm not for 1 minute trying to draw a parallel now. This is 18-19 Farker, because we know how that ended. But it was after that September international break. I think they played Middlesbrough at home. Teemu Pukki, first time he might have been tried down the middle in the championship. Mm-hmm. And won 1-0, scruffy game. And then they just went on, I don't know how many games it was, but it felt like they went on this really ultra consistent run of results. And we know how that ended. And if there's any way that Liam Manning can engineer that the other side of the break, and that will be tough because Coventry, Wrexham, for different reasons, would expect to be in and around that conversation. I think Stoke and West Brom coming up in reasonably short order off the back of those two. So it won't be an easy segment of games, but if they were to build on Blackburn in terms of results, then that really does feel like this season we've heard the stated ambition. We know what it is. We know what the transfer window has looked like in order to attain that. But if you've then got a body of, by that point, 7 or 8 game sample in the Championship, and Norwich are in and around those promotion places, then it begins to feel that they are matching up with the ambition with actually the deliverables in terms of what's possible this season. So that's exciting, and that's why I feel this fortnight now will be a positive, uplifting. Can't wait for the next game to come round rather than the alternative. And maybe that, given it's only took 90 minutes at Ewood Park to change the mood, maybe is a cautionary note that sadly it can turn the other way still. If they don't get a positive result at Coventry, if Wrexham is more of the same fitfulness at Carrow Road off the back of Millwall, Borough and Saints in the Cup, then 2 podcasts time from now we're talking again about, they said about ambitions to go top 6, but they're showing that there's still a little bit of work to do, and maybe that's overly optimistic. They are the lurches in mood that can accompany following Norwich in the Championship at this stage. So, that would be very, very pleasing to see if the other side of the international break, now they pick up where they left off at Blackburn.
One final point to end the podcast, just because it sprung into my mind, which is maybe quite an apt word to use, which is Mateus Chris Gordon's long throw, which might be the most unorthodox thing I've ever seen on a football pitch in my life. But by gosh, can that boy throw a ball? That is just a statement, really. I don't know what I want you to say with that, really, but it was. I audibly went wow when he threw it. It was. I was not expecting what came. That's going to be quite a weapon if Norwich can harness it.
Yeah, I mean, well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously they scored with the throw-in routine at Portsmouth, and thereafter Liam Manning talked about Harry Darling had been, quote, messing about at Colney after a training session, and they saw that and right, we'll incorporate that into our set piece template. And yeah, absolutely, I think Visgarden was. I don't think I've ever had to debate the prowess of respective throw-in techniques, but or distance covered. But that was Rory Delap. Rory Delap. I was going to say Liam Delap, but he's, as we know, a different character entirely. But that was a throwback because he's launched it well into the 6-yard box from kind of parallel to the penalty area. So, they just need to be a bit clever now because other teams, I'm sure, will cotton on to that. So just at the right time. But certainly now, the next time Matthias ventures over to the touchline to get his hands on the ball, everybody should just edge forward in their seat. Because if you didn't see it at Ewood Park, it is a thing to behold.
It's just the technique of it. It was almost like he didn't have bones. He went almost like elastic, and his head was basically behind his ankles to get the launch on it. It was incredible.
Well, that element with the arms was very much the in swimming, the butterfly kind of action where you almost pull your arms and haul them back over your body, and then almost drag yourself through the water. It was almost that to get the velocity and the distance on that launch. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we only saw it once though, didn't we? I don't think he did it again.
No, like you say, I'm sure it's about timing that. And it does feel like the long throw generally is having a bit of a re-emergence, I think, in the game. It sort of went for a while, and now teams seem to be trying to bring it back in. And I guess in the world of set piece coaches and whatnot, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, that's going to be great fun if he can get that going. And I think I'm right in saying, Paddy, and we've not made this up because I said it to you yesterday, and I feel you've heard it as well, that he's from a gymnastic background, isn't he? So even though he's quite slight, and we saw it in midweek where he was up against Kwashi, who plays for Southampton and is 6'6", and he rose high enough to win a header against him. And we're not talking about someone who's particularly, I'm trying to word this the right way. He's not the tallest, but he seems to have that kind of athletic gymnastic base that makes him quite flexible and an excellent jumping reach, which I think the Bromby sort of insight when we got him on spoke about. So he's going to be good fun if Norwich can harness all of that in the way. He's not the sort of player that you would expect given his height, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
No, but that was a notable element of his show reel, the amount of goals he scored in the air for a player of his stature. Absolutely. And I've read it, I've heard it somewhere. I can't place exactly where, but I think with not probably a huge amount of research, you could probably find Matthias's gymnastics background. And it just shows you, I remember way back now, we're going off on a tangent, but in the Stuart Pearce era at Coventry, so a long, long time ago, I think they introduced ballet because of the suppleness and the balance, and and you can imagine in maybe a more macho-dominated environment that football was back in the 80s, that was kind of subject to ridicule. But you've got to think out of the box. You've got to be innovative, and if you've got a player there who's got those naturally athletic skills, then absolutely incorporate them, because any edge you can find this league this season, you're probably going to need it.
Absolutely. That seems like a nice place to end the podcast. Paddy, thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching or listening. We will, of course, take a slight break next weekend. There'll be no podcast next week as the Championship takes a break for England to play Serbia and Andorra, which are games I'm sure, like me, you just simply cannot wait for. I won't be able to sleep for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be back at the CBS Arena in a fortnight time, where Norwich City will be hoping to continue their very, very good record on that part of in that part of the world, and that ground in particular. Thank you very much for listening and watching. We'll see you at the next one.